In this video, we're going to make sure that our pipelines are up and running. So the first thing is to go to your 13.5.11, that's our secure port as we saw in the last video. Click on Login. This is, of course, for ISII. I'll click on Remember here. You don't have to do that. And then notice that the very first thing you see is under Status and then Pipeline Status that we have two pipelines. We have Pipeline HTTP and we have Pipeline MQ. And they're running on this host, and the problem right now is that their status is down. So what we want to do here in this video is bring them up, make sure they're running, and then also make sure that the web interface says that they're running. Now, in ICFM, we have some scripts to kind of help us do this. The very first one is this one here, and you'd want to run this as root. So you'd log into the supplemental server as root, and then you'd run this. You only do this one time, and what it will do is make sure that ISII and then these pipelines in particular are going to start up when the server itself starts up. So that's this first one. So you would basically come in here and you would run that. Now, I've already done it, so I won't do it here. The second one here is going to turn on SNMP, and SNMP is the Simple Network Management Protocol. It's a popular protocol for network management, and basically it's used to be sure that our that the web interface sees a running pipeline as up and running. And in fact, the script here, the startup script, will actually install this script here, which is the SNMP script, so that when the server starts up, that the SNMP piece that we need will also start when the server starts. So let's just show you here. If I go into our server here and I paste this in, take a look at what's going to happen. We should see not very much because this script is actually just running in the background. Now, the next thing we need to do is start and or stop our pipeline. So let's say that mine is already running, so let's pretend that it is not, let's just shut it off. So let's hit stop. So I'm going to go here and hit stop, and that will stop the service, and that's because it was running. Now, I know, because I was working on this before, that if we have this second pipeline. So the first one, of course, is this HTTP pipeline, and the second one is our IMQ pipeline, and they're both running, or they were both running. So I'm going to stop both of those just to show you how the scripts work. Now, if I were to go to the web interface now and refresh that interface, notice how we have down and running. So one is running and one is down. And here's what this would look like. And here we see that we actually have both stopped, right? I mean, we just did this. If this happens to you where you have something, you have them both stopped or them both running, but the information you're seeing in the web interface doesn't reflect that. So you can see here, right? We have down and, now it says down and down. The reason is because you have to refresh this page to get the latest status. So if you don't do that, it will ISII will wait 60 seconds before it updates this screen. Otherwise, you can do it manually. So now what we need to do is I want to show you where it says not available, status down, the rest of this. Let's look at the SNMP part by itself. And what I mean by that is I'm going to turn these both back on. We're going to start with the IMQ. And notice what happens when you start this. You'll see a child process has begun, and this is an operating system PID. So again, as we said, the pipelines run on a node. The node is this current operating system. It's our VM in this case. And when you start a node, you're starting a process, an operating system process. So now we're going to do the same, but this time with HTTP. So they should both be running. We get two separate PIDs here. And now if I go back to our web interface and I press Control-R to refresh the page, we'll see that they're both running. Now, what I mentioned earlier was about SNMP. So if I switch here and up to this top window and I hit Control-C to stop the SNMP portion, take a look now what happens in the web interface. Again, I'm going to press Control-R, and it says acquiring data acquiring data, and then it just says not available down. The reason for that is because the SNMP portion, the service that sends they run through what are called traps, the SNMP service is not running. And because it's not running, the website, which uses SNMP to get its status information, has no way to get status. So if I start it up again, and then I go back to the web interface and I press Control R, they are back up and running, even though we see that they are indeed running down here. And actually, you can test that by running your pipeline command. Let me show you. So if you don't have the web interface, in other words, you can do this manually. And the idea is that you go to opt IBM ISII bin pipeline, and this is the pipeline executable that's running all these pipelines. Remember, we're on our node. This is running the pipeline. If you do a -L, in fact, let me just show you this. If you do a pipeline all by itself, you'll see all of the options that you have. And if you do a -L, you'll see that it will display the daemon status, in other words, the status of that process. And you have to give it a -in in this case, which will give you the node name, because remember, we are running on our node, and that's pipeline MQ, and you'll see it is indeed running. Now, notice what happens if you just type in some completely bogus name. It will say stopped, even though it's actually never been running before. So just keep that in mind. And then separately, if you want to run if you want to check the HTTP pipeline, type that, and you'll see that this service is indeed running. And another useful thing is, and you can see it listed here, is that if you need to, actually, let's do it like this. If you need to debug, and not specifically debug, but if you're having trouble with a given pipeline and you want a lot more output from it, then you can, when you start up that pipeline, which you would do with a -S here to start in the background, for example. Then you give it the name of the pipeline. So again, this -n that we've seen, and then you'd have to give it a C, where you'd give it the pipeline MQ, for example, .ini, and that would start a daemon. It would start the pipeline, which of course is a daemon, and that will give you debug level details, so you can go in and see what's wrong with a given process. Really with data coming in or going out. If there's problems with it, for example, if your XML is poorly formed or something, you can see that data through here. Let me give you an example. So if I run this, it's already running, so it's going to complain and say that you can't do that. So what I'm going to do is hit E in here. You don't really need a -C in this case, so take all that out. And that should end the service, and it did. So now if I rerun that command, it should start up again, and you'll see our child process. I'll hit enter to go to the next line, and now we can go in and look at the logs, which are listed in here. So we can go opt IBM ISII, and then instead of going to bin, we'll just go to logs, and you'll see in here we go to EWAS, remember that's our embedded WAS, and go to LL, and then now take a look at this. We have some details you'll see under system error, and actually system out as well, that was just recently updated, and here we go. And you generally will see, I don't know if we'll see it here, but if it's a debug level information, it'll say DBG for debug, and I don't see it here, so let's go into system error. But if you need to do this, you will see that level listed there.